Hey, this is James T. Kahn, and this will be the second video tinkering with the voxel code from libGDX. So in this video, we're going to achieve what we see here, which is adding or using vertex colors. In the previous video, when we brought the code over, if we take a look here, this is what it looks like currently. We have all these chunks, and they're just different colored squares, you could say. But you can't, in its current state, you can't set a color to an individual voxel. They're just, the whole chunk's going to be the same color. So what we're going to do today is add some code that allows us to set colors to the individual voxels themselves, and that'll be using vertex colors. So we'll be modifying the vertices. So let's get to it. So to get started, we're going to need a way to pass in a lot of parameters to our voxel world. And we don't want to do that just through a bunch of constructor parameters. As you can see right now, we pass in the chunk size, but we're going to need to pass in a lot more things, especially as these videos go on, depending on what we want to add down the road. We'll want to be able to, configure this voxel world however we want. So with that being said, I'm going to bring over create two new classes. I'm just going to copy them because I've already created them, but then we'll take a look at them. The first one's going to be voxel mode. And so this is going to be a new enum. And we have this material color, and that is the default behavior which we have right now, where each chunk is using a color from the material and it's applied to the entire chunk, all the voxels inside. And then we're also going to have a new mode here, which we're going to work on today, which is vertex color. And if we take a look at the other new object, we have voxel settings. It's going to hold the vertex size. If we go to voxel chunk, and take a look at that. Right now, the vertex size is hard-coded, and it is 6 because that is the 3 positions in the vertex. That's the X, Y, and Z position. And then you have the normal position as well, your X, Y, and Z normal, and that is 6 vertices inside the vertex. But instead, this is actually going to have to change programmatically depending on are we using vertex colors or not. So that's going to have to go away. And we'll work on that soon. So that's why we're putting it in here. Those parameters that go into our constructor, the chunk size, 20 by 4 by 20. That's also, or not the chunk size, but that is the world size. That is going to come into our settings. Of course, we're now going to have a reference to that voxel mode. We'll keep it defaulted to material color. And I'll talk about this later. We're going to have this use packed colors. Right now I have it set to true. And we'll see what these mean as we're implementing them here. And then just some getters and setters, nothing else crazy there. So now if we head over to our voxel game class, we'll be making some changes here. Let's take a look. So we've got our instantiation of our voxel world right here. So that's now going to change. We're going to use the settings object. So let's create a couple lines here, and we'll create this voxel settings object. It already has some of the settings we want as default, but I'm going to go ahead and set the voxel mode to this new mode that we're working on, the vertex color. So we'll set the voxel mode, and now I'm going to change these 3 values here to just be the voxel settings. We'll pass that, and that'll be the new parameter here. And let's just let's copy this, and let's go to this voxel world and remove these values. And now we're instead going to have voxel settings. And then we'll have to do, so it looks like originally we can just move this line down. This was using the parameter chunks X instead of the member variable chunks X. But we can just take that, move it down here. And now it's going to use the member ones, which is fine. And then we just have to do a couple of things. We have to replace this. And we'll do settings. There we go. All right. And so that's our settings there. And now what else do we need? So we're going to have to build out our vertex attributes. Let's come, where are we going to put this? We'll put it right here. Yes, that should be fine. I think right now, what are we doing for attributes here? If we scroll down, here we go. So when we create the meshes, these are the meshes used for the chunk, or for each chunk. if you take a look here, it's passing in the vertex attributes, which I mentioned before. Right now, it's just using position and normal. And if you want to see what that looks like at a lower level, trust me, we'll be getting in there soon. But we can take a look real quick. When the voxels are created, we have this, for instance, this creates the top face of the voxel, or the cube. And this is the positions. So we have our X, Y, and Z position. That's our first 3 vertex attributes. Then we have our normal 0, 1, 0. That is our second 3 vertex attributes. So that gives us our 6 vertices right there. Or, yep, 6 vertices there. And so now let's go back to our voxel world. And that's going to have to change, right? So right now it's hard-coded to use position and normal. But if we want to use color, well, that is another attribute. So we have to include that. But we want to include it programmatically. We depending on what our settings are, we may want it or we may not. So that being the case, we can build out, what we can do is have an array of vertex attributes, or just vertex attribute, not the plural, equals a new array. And then we'll do just add, and we're always going to want the position, and we're always going to want the normal as well. So we'll always add those to that array list, or just array. And now we'll go if settings dot what do we want? Voxel mode. So if the settings voxel mode is equal to a vertex color, then we're going to add another attribute to this array, and that will be the vertex attribute for color. But you can see that there is a color unpacked and a color packed, right? There's 2 different colors, and the difference here, and you'll actually see the difference more clearly when we start implementing that. But unpacked is going to be a separate vertice for each of the values inside of a color. So you have the RGBA. Then you're going to have 4 separate, it's going to add 4 vertices to each vertex. So you'd have 1 for the red, green, blue, and your alpha. But color packed, what it does is you pack your entire color, all values, into 1 float. So then you only have to add 1 additional vertice rather than 4 to have that color and pass that color to your GPU. We're going to code it to use either option, and depending on your needs, so like I said, depending on your implementation, I think some shaders support both. Some shaders, if GDX DLTF, I think it may support both, but I'm not 100% sure. So we're just going to code in for both of these options, and then you get to see how they both work. And to do that, so we're going to do a settings dot is using packed colors, and we'll just do a ternary operator here. If we're using packed colors, then we'll use the vertex attribute color packed. Else, we'll use the vertex attribute unpacked. So that's how we'll do that. And then down below, we'll actually need the actual vertex attributes, the combined attributes, so that we can pass this into the mesh. So we'll create that here, new vertex attributes. And what we do is we can call attribute.toArray, and we just pass in the type here. If you don't, you're going to get an error. Okay, so, and this is probably, let me rename this just for clarity here, attribute array. Let's do that. Okay, and now we're going to have to get the or set our vertex size. So to do that, let's get our settings object, set vertex size, and vertex attributes dot vertex size. And so that's why we're doing this programmatically, because one is depending on if we're using color packed, color unpacked, or even if we're not using color at all, this vertex size is going to vary, but we do need to know it later on when we're doing some calculations. Now, one other thing we have to do is if we hover over this variable, the documentation says that the size of a single vertex is in bytes. So to get the integer value, which is what we want, we're going to have to divide that by 4. And that is all we need to do. So that'll give us our vertex size. Next, if we come down, our chunks are actually going to need to know about the settings as well. And let's see, do we want to do that now? Not yet. We'll get there. let's come back down because let's finish what we're doing here. We have this vertex attributes that we created. We'll scroll down, and now this will be replaced. Instead of position to normal, we're going to pass in this vertex attributes that we've created. After that, we'll scroll down a little bit further, and here we are. Here's where the materials are actually created. So as I mentioned before, right now the chunks currently use material that has a randomly, just kind of randomly chosen color values per chunk. But now we're going to have settings for that. So we're going to say, in fact, let's do a switch statement, and we'll do settings dot get voxel mode, and I'm going to have IntelliJ just create them for me. So if it's material color, then we just keep doing what we've been doing. If it's vertex color instead, and we could probably change this later, but for now, it's just going to be a blank material. I mean, in this case, they could all probably be the same material, I guess. Maybe we could do that. Might be worth a look, but that's the change we'll do for now. And just looking at my reference here. Okay, I think that's all we need here. So let's go up to our voxel chunk instantiation, which is here. And we're going to now pass in our voxel settings object to the chunk as well. And I'm going to Alt-Enter, add voxel settings as a new parameter. And then we'll go to voxel chunk. And let's see what we need. So first off, we're going to want to get a reference to this settings object because we're going to need it in a couple places. So we'll just go right here, this dot settings equals settings, and Alt-Enter, create a new field. Next up, what we're going to do, we're just going to go ahead and break the code so that we can fix it. So this vertex size is no longer valid. Let's take that out, and let's see what we broke with that right here. So now we just go settings dot get vertex size, and let's go down some more. So we're going to start getting into the vertices next, I think. Here, let's go here first. We're going to want to do a Boolean. So this is where the vertices are getting calculated. And what we're going to need to do is determine what color are we using for the current vertex, or the current face, should I say, the current face that we are creating. Because in this code, if we take a look at it, we're creating a top face, bottom, left, right, front, back. So we're creating the faces of the cube programmatically if we need to. So I'm going to create a Boolean here called use Vertex Colors, and that'll just go settings dot get voxel mode equal to voxel mode dot vertex color. Then down here, we'll say if using Vertex Colors. We're going to create a new field called current color. And the reason why I'm doing this current color field is instead of having to update all of these methods to pass in a color value, I'm just going to create a private property in this class to hold that value. So we'll go colors, and actually, so yeah, we're going to need all this. We're going to need a colors array to choose from in the current color. So I got a little ahead of myself. Let's go up to the top of the class and add those things that we're going to want. So let's add private color, and we want to call that current color. Make sure I import the right one. And then we'll do private final a color array of colors equals, and we'll just do green, brown, not blue, and we'll do forest. And this is just for this video, we're just going to do some random colors. So now that we have that, let's go back down here, if using vertex color, and we'll say current color equals colors mathutils.random. So we're just going to pick one at random, 0, and then colors.length -1. And that should allow us to get it's just going to, every iteration, every every time we're creating this cube that we're currently on, we're going to get a random color, and then we're going to use that color. Now, instead of passing that color in, we're just going to go to our create top and bottom and update those now to have that new color. And to do that, I think we'll add a new method so that we can just reuse the same method over and over, because there's a lot of these, right? So let's go all the way down to the bottom here, and we'll say private int. It's going to return an integer, and I'll explain that in a moment. Add color to vertices. So it's going to take in vertices and the vertex offset value. What we'll do here is if current color is equal to null, then we will return 0. So if that's the case, if there is no current color, then we're not going to change anything. We're going to return a 0, and you'll see why soon. If we do settings.use packed colors, we'll say the vertices, and then take the vertex offset equals current color dot to float bits. So when you're using packed colors, all you got to do here is call 2 float bits, and that's it. You've set your entire color to 1 vertice. Else, if we're in the else statement, that means we're using unpacked, and what that's going to look like is here we'll go vertex offset plus plus equals current color dot r. I want to duplicate that a few times. We don't need the plus plus on the last one, so we'll have R, G, B, and A. And oops, so not vertex offset, that is vertices. There we go. So we're adding to the vertices. One way or another, we're going to add color to the vertices. In this case, we're going to return a 1 because we've added an additional vertice, and we want to keep track of how many vertices we've added. So we return a 1 because we've added 1. So in this case, you guessed it, we're going to return 4. There we go. So this is the method. We're going to just use this over and over again. The vertex offset is just to keep track of, hey, what array, where's our index inside of the vertices array currently? And we need to increment that because we are adding the next position. These are all separate vertices, so we need to increment this offset. But we need to know where we currently are in the vertices. And that's why we have to pass in this vertex offset as well. So let's go back up to the top here, and we'll just start from the top. Now here we go. So our create top method. And what we'll do is vertices. Actually, no, we won't need to do that. You can see the current pattern is kind of doing the same thing, which we've just done in our method. We've just made it a little more reusable. So what do we call add color? Oh, these are static methods, and I'm going to make these, I'm not going to make these static anymore. And that is because we're reusing this current color value up here. And I'm just going to make this a private. I'm not going to have this be a static value. It's not static, it's to the class. So with that being the case, I'm actually going to remove the static from these methods. And I don't think there's any harm in doing that, but if there is, then feel free to let me know in the comments. Okay, there we go. So now we should be able to call that method, and we'll just say add color to vertices, pass in the vertices array that we're going to add to, and the current vertex offset. And now we're going to also have to take that return value and add it to our vertex offset, right? So that's what that return integer is for. And if we're not adding any colors, it would just return a 0, so we wouldn't increment at all. But if it returns 4 because we had color packed, well, we need that offset updated here because we're going to use this all the way down this chain here. And now we can copy and paste this vertex, or we can just copy and paste this line of code right here and just add it to each line. So if we try to run the application now, I think we're going to have some errors still to fix, which is fine. So we have this old reference to a vertex size here. And we'll want to replace that with the settings, not get vertex size. And I see another error down here. So same thing. Settings. Oh, we don't have settings yet. So we're going to have to make it a variable that we can access. And it gets passed in, but we weren't actually setting it to a variable. So we can go do the same thing. This dot settings equals settings. Create a new field. And down here, as we go settings dot get vertex size. Let's see if there's any other issues here. And it's not. So we have it running. We can see now that all the voxels are being just random, one of the random 3 colors that we put in our array. So this is great. Now with this information, we could down the road customize this more. Right now it's kind of incoherent colors, you know, it's just randomized. Probably you won't want them to be random down the road. You may even want different colors on the top versus on the sides, but making this changes that we've made today kind of opens that possibility up now. We just have to keep adding more to the code and expanding upon it. So let's just make sure if we go back and change our settings, I think in Voxel game, if we tell it to use material, let's just make sure that's still working. And it is, so we still have the previous way of doing it where it's a material controlling the color rather than individual vertex colors. And so to keep the videos as short as possible, that'll be it for today. I'll end the video here, and you know, maybe next time we might try to work more on those colors, maybe have a little more control over them rather than just randomized values. So that's what we'll look at next time. Thanks.